Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
All right.
Oh man, that was you got me there. Yeah, I was not expecting that one.
That's my new catchphrase, everyone. All right.
You keep threatening to make these things catchphrases, and then thankfully you forget them week to week. So,
well, it's been a while since I've come up with a DZ like that one.
Yeah, maybe this one will stick. You want to take care of upkeep?
Yeah, I think it goes untap and then upkeep and then draw. So go ahead.
All right. So first up, we've got Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is one of the people who brings this show to you weekly. They are a store. They stock all sorts of playmats, dice bags, tokens, art prints of magic art and art from throughout art history. They make really, really solid products. Josh is a friend of the show. We definitely stand by their products and recommend them to anyone who's looking for something to, spruce up their play space a little bit. It's classy stuff for our ever classy listeners. So can't recommend it highly enough. But on top of that, we have a affiliate code. So if you're going there and you think, hey, I want to buy some of these wonderful tokens with the art of Goya and Rembrandt and Da Vinci on them, you can enter the code Commontary, spelled in all uppercase letters, spelled exactly as it is in the name of this podcast. You will get 5% off your order. We also get a little bit of a kickback, so it works out well for everyone. You get a little bit of a discount, and you help keep the lights on. Again, that code is Commontary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast, 5% off. What do you got for us, Adrian?
All right. Well, we're now an NTG Finance podcast. Stone Throwing Devils, is it the next big thing? No, I'm kidding. Thank you to all of our patrons. You too can be one for just as little as $1 an episode. You can hear the entire show, including our pre and post show. Didn't really have a very long pre-show today. I know you hear us bragging about it sometimes, but today was a little terser than usual. But you will get access to it, and you get access to our patron-exclusive Discord channel, which I think is the coolest perk. We have a great community. Check it out sometime.
Yeah, I think this week's pre-show was a little short because we kind of already put in the work and figured out what we were going to do for this episode. So that always helps. But this week, we're talking about, we both came up with a list of 5 underrated cards in Pauper that, we think maybe should see a little bit more play, or maybe there's a reason they don't see more play.
And the list, I want to preface the list with the list is actually really long. Like, there are so many cards in Pauper that don't see play. And when we were sort of discussing this and talking, with some of our friends about it, I don't think any of the cards they suggested actually made it onto my list. So there are a lot of cards out there that are not included on this list that I do think might see a little bit more play, and we can discuss them if we need to. Yeah,
definitely. So how about you start us off? What's your number 5? And we're going to count down from least underrated to most underrated in our opinion. So what's your number 5 for this list, Adrian?
I actually just thought of another one, and can I switch now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So for everyone who was wondering what my real number 5 was, it was actually Putrid Leech. But you know what? We've talked about Putrid Leech, and I just did a quick Google search. Why do people not play Order of the Ebon Hand?
Order of the Ebon Hand. Can you for the folks at home who weren't playing during Fallen Empires, read that one off?
Yeah. So this was actually a really good card when it was available. It was colloquially referred to as a Pump Knight. There were actually 2 of them. There was one in black and one in white. The white one does mirror this one, but the black one was much better at the time, and I think that's because the white deck was like the deck to beat. But anyway, Order of the Ebon Hand is black for a 2/1 pro white cleric. Give it black gives it +1/+0 till end of turn, so you can pump it, the Pump Knight, and then black gives it first strike till end of turn. So maybe it's just too big of a mana sink, but this was a good card back in the day, and with the rise of decks like mono white, I don't know, maybe it could be good against those decks.
So I've definitely in the sideboard of mono white decks in the past run Order of Leetbur, which is the white version of this. It's exactly the same card, except it's white and it has pro black instead. And this was back in the day when mono black was running, a decent amount of targeted removal, or you'd see targeted black removal show up in other decks. And it put in work there. I guess my big thing is, it does help you in that one particular matchup, but I'm kind of thinking about like other white cards that see play, and a lot of them have flying.
I think one of the other things too is white. Like I feel this card was so good because of the format, because of the environment it existed in, and white is just not super dominant color. Like, we used to joke about Boros as mono white aggro plus red, right? Mm-hmm. So that's all red removal. This card doesn't red removal doesn't care about this card. It dies to Electrickery. Like, I think you're right, but like with the double pips, it even dies to your own Kambah Witches. That's probably why people don't play it. But I do like it.
That is true, and no amount of white cards is going to stop that from happening. And mono black is still showing up occasionally, so I could again, as you pointed out, the 2 black pips is definitely good, but I don't know. I feel like the white one has slightly more applications, and even that, outside of a sort of dedicated mono white aggro list, I'm not a huge fan of it.
So, side note, we're actually off to kind of a fun start. I cheated and have technically done 3 cards for my first one.
There you go. A loose 5, shall we say.
Yeah, but the card was good back in the day, back when the mono black, like Necropotence, aggro deck, that deck is the deck I'm thinking of specifically. Not that there were definitely more than one Necropotence decks in its time, but I don't know. It just seemed cool, and it seems like it might be good against certain decks.
Yeah, definitely. So my number 5 that I'm surprised I don't see played more frequently is Arc Lightning. And Arc Lightning is 2 and a red for a sorcery. Deal 3 damage divided as you choose between any number of target creatures and or players. And I think that this is actually a really good card.
Arc Lightning is awesome in Limited.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute beast in Limited, and I think the big thing here is it doesn't fit into a deck like Burn. It's Boros already has flame bolt or firebolt in the deck, and also lightning bolts and galvanic blasts. I think it's just kind of fallen into this place of it doesn't do quite enough at its mana cost. And I like the fact that it can be up to a 3-for-1. That's great, but I don't know. What are some of your takes on this card, Adrian?
I like it quite a bit. Maybe you could play it in Tron, but at the same time, what I'm immediately reminded of is Twin Bolt. Twin Bolt, granted, is less powerful than this, but it is an instant, and you can use it to kill 2 things. So, like with this, it has a little bit more utility. Maybe you could kill 3 things. I feel like where this card really hit its sweet spot was probably Forked Bolt. Just R to do this to 2 creatures. Even at sorcery speed is pretty powerful. So I kind of wish that was in the format, and then I think people would play that card, and then we wouldn't even think about this card. So it's in this weird middle ground is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And one other thing I want to bring up, we're verging on spoiler season for a Masters set, which means there are downshifts. And obviously that discussion is going to occur within the community about what we want downshifted.
We're a downshift format now.
Yeah, we are, in large part. And one card I wanted to bring up, how would you feel about Arc Trail? It's 1 and a red for a sorcery. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player and 1 damage to another target creature or player.
It costs 1 less?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, I have to look it up. I'm not...
So it costs 1 less. There's only one way you can divide up the damage.
It's an uncommon. I was like, why have I never played this card before?
Yeah, no. This is not already pauper legal. It's just something I kind of wanted to throw out there because it's a card that comes to mind when I think about Arc Lightning and its specific effect that it has.
I feel like it's not bad. Would Boros... So the thing about these cards is like they have great utility. Maybe you'd play them as like a 1-of or a 2-of, a 1-of in like Tron or Boros or something. That's really the only place I can see playing them. But they are really good utility spells. But I don't know if like you said, Burn doesn't want it. Like red deck wins decks don't really want it. So it would have to go into like a red control deck.
Yeah, and with when it comes to Tron, if they're looking to kill off a bunch of X1s, decks in the past and currently have run main deck Electrickery to fine results. So I don't know. I think Arc Lightning's a little bit outclassed, but I do really like it in some sort of red X, maybe red black mid range deck. I feel like it could go pretty well there, just as kind of, I have Edicts. I'm going to clean up some of the smaller stuff with this Arc Lightning and then Chainers you.
I played against that red-black deck the other day. It would actually have been really good. I was playing the blue-white prowess list, just, tournament practice, just goofing off. And I think that card would have actually beat me pretty bad, so I'm glad I didn't have it.
All right. So take us away with what your number 4 for your list is.
The number 4 for my list is Ornithopter. I used to play it. It's a really sweet card. It's really great in Affinity. It's best friends with Springleaf Drum. I think the reason people don't play is because there's no cranial plating, and that's what Ornithopter is really good at carrying.
Well, so sure, it carries a cranial plating really well. My critique of this, and we've gone back and forth on this in the past, I just feel like having that as like it seems sweet in the openers you have it, where it's like land, Ornithopter, Springleaf Drum, another 1-drop. Like that feels sweet to me, but I guess my concern with it has always been like, this is a absolutely miserable top deck, I have to imagine.
So when I used to play it, I was mostly playing it instead of the Germ token producer, the Living Weapon,
Flare Husk.
I was playing it instead of Flare Husk because my rationale was that it does all the same things Flare Husk does. Kind of like for the creature half of Flare Husk, it does everything that Flare Husk does, except you can cast it and the Drum on turn 1. The Husk obviously leaves behind a piece of equipment when it dies, so that's pretty valuable. In the Perilous Research builds, you can sacrifice the Germ token itself instead of the equipment, so you basically are not actually down a permanent or an artifact in any way. Rate. I can't talk. Ornithopter, its big thing is that you can't really attack with it, and there's no Arcbound to put counters on it. There's no cranial plating to put on it. There's no battle cry to put on it, so it kind of just sits there, and it either blocks something or you sack it to ATOG. So,
I mean, I guess now that you bring up blocking, like it does in some way help shore up the Delver matchup, just because it can act as a way to keep a fairy at bay, and
I've definitely used it for that. This build is old, my build version of this. I want to say this is back in the Cloud of Fairies day, so you did have to watch out a little bit more, I guess, but I don't know. It was I feel like I won just as much with that version of the deck as I did with other versions.
And is there really any other home for Ornithopter besides Affinity, or is it kind of a one-trick pony in that regard?
I mean, really, it's going to go in some sort of artifact-based deck, because I feel like any deck that wants it also kind of wants ATOG, and I'm thinking mostly of eggs here, where maybe you want some zero-cost artifacts, but since we don't really have like a Cheerios-type deck in the format, then I don't really think any other decks want it. And that's the case with a lot of Affinity cards traditionally as well, so it's sort of its own thing.
That is pretty fair. There's a lot of cards that Affinity plays that in any other shell would be absolutely miserable, so fair enough. So my number 4 on this list is Complete Disregard, and this is 2 and a black for an instant with Devoid, and what it does, it exiles a creature with power 3 or less, and I actually really, really like this card. I used to run it in Alchemy as like a one of, and I think this is just a really powerful removal spell. What's your experience and what are your thoughts on this card?
I feel like the only time I've ever seen it have been in, it fits in there. It fits in the blue-black control decks where you can either tutor for it if you need it. Pyroblast and Hydroblast wouldn't have hit it anyway, so it's not like the Devoid matters. But getting to exile a creature with power 3 or less, and being able to search for it is pretty good. Adds a lot to your utility suite. Makes it so it doesn't go to the graveyard if that's relevant. I don't mind the card. I think I've also seen it in mono black control sideboards a time or two. Yeah,
so I just like this for the general utility of it. 3 or less is is a actual real calculable downside. Like, this is miserable against affinity. It's not great when your opponent resolves a Gurmag Angler, but it does handle pretty much everything else outside of that. I mean, obviously Boggles, it doesn't do anything, but that it wasn't doing anything there anyway, most likely. It, in my opinion, it's just a really, really solid piece of removal. It's a little situational, but it does also get around protection spells. You know, you don't have to worry about, you know, someone casting Apostle's Blessing or anything like that. And again, as you noted, it's an instant, like if you're playing teachings in your deck somewhere, you can tutor this up so that way you can grab it when you need it. And I do just like the little minor upside of Devoid. So I think it's a much better card than most people give it credit for. Oh, and also definitely it's my favorite application of this is targeting Stormbound Geist with it. That's just...
Oh, yeah, that's a game. That's actually like... Yeah, that's a good reason to run this card if you have a lot of, or Young Wolf even.
Yeah, just those resilient types of threats that come back from the graveyard. Even against, for example, Mono Black, it can eat up one of the like 3-drops, and that way they can't unearth it later if they're running Unearth. The exile clause, the fact that it exiles versus destroying does make it really appealing to me. And while obviously I think this probably... Actually, does this hit more things than Doomblade?
It hits everything in Mono Black, right?
Yeah.
That's upside.
I've got to imagine that this probably hits a wider amount of creatures, but at the same time probably hits less creatures that will end the game. Like, it's almost never killing an ATOG. It's never killing any of the 4/4's affinity plays. It's never killing a Gurmag Angler. It's definitely never killing an Ulamog's Crusher. But I like this just kind of as spot removal, especially when paired with Edicts to follow it up, because this can get rid of that pesky thing. A Young Wolf, Stormrider Spirit. God, am I having an absolute stroke here? Is that what it's called? The blue thing? Stormbound Geist. There we go. I
just had to wait for you to sweat it out a little.
I came up with the other, I think it's a Shadows over Innistrad Flying Spirit at common. So I got close. But yeah, complete disregard. Definitely check it out if you're playing some sort of black deck. It's a nice piece of spot removal that handles tougher to deal with threats. All right. That was my number 4. What is your number 3 most unrated card? And this one's kind of a shock for me because I've got the list here.
It is a shock to you because it's actually Pyrite Spellbomb, which does do shocks.
Yes, exactly.
Pirate Spellbomb is a 1-mana artifact with red. Sacrifice Pirate Spellbomb. Pirate Spellbomb deals 2 damage to target creature or player. 1, sacrifice Pirate Spellbomb, draw a card. And it's just the utility, my God.
Okay, so you just like the fact that while this is a 2-mana shock, it does give you the option of also cycling?
Yeah, you can cycle the card. You can sack it to ATOG. I mean, not that gets you the card, but you could. You can fetch it out with Trinket Mage. It's just a strong card, and the sort of the whole Spellbomb cycle, really, except Nile Spellbomb, suffers from just not being quite good enough. Most of the abilities just aren't super relevant. Sorry, go ahead. So
I actually pulled up all the different spell bombs. And I kind of want to. There's one other one that I think is potentially worth it. Aether Spellbomb, the first Mirrodin one. It's generic mana for an artifact. Blue, sacrifice it, return a creature to its owner's hand, and 1, sacrifice it, draw a card. Is that it doesn't actually kill the thing, but I have to imagine that's fairly close in terms of like overall value.
Yeah, it's good versus Angler. It doesn't kill your opponent, which maybe is relevant sometimes, but that's also a powerful one. I also like the Flight one for what it's worth.
Really, the one that pops to give something flying and you can pay a blue to draw a card?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, say that one more time.
So Flight Spellbomb is a generic for an artifact tap sack. Target creature gets flying, and then you can pay a blue to draw a card.
Yes. Sorry, thank you. I was like Googling it, and then you were talking, and then I don't know what happened to my head. But yeah, because at the very least, you could also sacrifice it. You could give your ATOG flying, which could be relevant. I imagine that it's not on par with Temur Battle Rage because that actually gives you trample, which is probably better. But it feels a little similar to that in my mind, and it counts towards your affinity count. So I do like Flight Spellbomb. It's just a little bit slow, I think.
Okay, that's definitely fair. And so Pyrite Spellbomb, you obviously talked about it in the frame of putting it in an affinity shell. Is there anywhere else that you could potentially see that showing up?
No, I think Flight is probably best for affinity. When you want to make a creature big, you want to make a big creature be able to get in. I think. I mean, maybe Ulamog's Crusher. Maybe you could run like a Trinket Mage version of Tron, and then you have that, and you have Map. You have a bunch of spell bombs and the Map, and oh man, that just doesn't sound very good. But I'm sure that's why people don't. I'm sure that's why people don't do it.
I've heard worse ideas. All right.
Well, thank you.
So I've got my number 3, and this is a card that actually saw standard play. And this is Grapple with the Past. It's an instant for 1 and a green. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. So it doesn't need to be one of the ones that you just milled. I really like this. It does not dig as deep as something like Commune with Nature, for example. Or, sorry, not Commune with Nature. I guess it doesn't dig as far as Commune with Nature does anyway, but Commune with the Gods. It's a similar, they've been really big on this, like, green gets to look through a chunk of the top of their library and get something out of it. But in this case, this can be self-mill 3 and recover something that was already in there. I really like this in a graveyard deck. What are some of your thoughts on this card, Adrian?
It is awesome in a graveyard deck. And it feels really good because, like you said, it's an instant. And then you get whatever. So like with the Commune with the Gods and stuff like that, you do have to pick right from the cards you initially got. So if you did one of these and then you did 2 of them, like sure that did cost you 2 cards, but you do, even if you whiff, you do get to pick something maybe from your last time if you weren't able to do it, and you've seen 6 cards. So I think that there are pros and cons to each. I would be very interested. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I like the fact that because it's any card that's in your graveyard versus the Commune of the Gods style effect where you reveal cards and you choose one from them and the rest go to your graveyard. I do like the fact that you kind of, with Grapple of the Past, you always know what your lowest return on investment is. You can always say, okay, these are the lands and creatures I have in the bin. I can at least get one of these back to my hand. And I like the fact that, like, most of the you rarely ever see someone whiff completely off a Commune with the Gods, but I do like the fact that with this you always know, hey, I can at least get X back, versus going, all right, time to flip over the top 5, and if I miss, then that's just too bad.
I think my favorite version of these effects is probably actually Satyr Wayfinder. It adds a body to the board, so it's good in Tordex. It digs fairly deep, and you get to pick, I think, the 2 cards that these kind of decks really want, which is a land, so they can keep going, and then they can get back the creature another way.
Yeah, I definitely think like Grapple with the Past does lend itself to sort of some grindy green, probably black, graveyard-based mid-range or control deck. So if you're working on something like that, I would definitely check this out. Again, it doesn't dig as deep, but it does give you a strict upgrade over, what was that one from Oath of the Gatewatch? Corpse Churn? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Let me look it up. Corpse Churn, I remember not being very good.
I think it's this, but it's just a creature, and it's black instead of green.
Yeah, you get just a creature. Yeah, okay. It's the same. Yeah, and it's black, like you said.
Okay, so yeah, I think Grapple is almost always better, and green black is kind of the colors in our format that likes to do graveyard graveyard type shenanigans. All right, what is your number 2 on this list?
My number 2 is Entourage of Trest, a card that I thought was going to be insane. It's 5 and a green, so 5 mana total for a 4/4 elf soldier. When there's a battlefield, you become the monarch, and it can block an additional creature each combat as long as you're the monarch. And I'm just like, why was this card not good? I thought this card was going to be amazing.
Okay, so where are you imagining, what sort of deck are you imagining this card showing up in?
I was legitimately imagining it in Tron. I think in Elves it's a huge win more, so I don't think they really want it, although maybe it is good. 5 mana does seem pretty steep for not like comboing out your opponent though. But in Tron, I saw it as a way for them to fight the Monarch decks, which maybe, honestly, they didn't really need the help. So that's probably, maybe that's a big reason why it didn't get played. Tron absolutely crushes Monarch. Maybe you could use it to win grindier matchups, or even the mirror. If you were the Monarch and your opponent wasn't able to cut the Monarch, you would eventually, get a ton of card advantage. And it's not like if they bounce it or kill it, you lose that. So I thought maybe that was good. So yeah, I was really not sure why it wasn't like a one of somewhere. So you can't flicker it, I guess.
It's got that. I mean, you can. Works just fine with flicker, but
oh yeah, because you become the Monarch.
Yeah, I think. How much do you think this was hurt by the fact that it can't interact with the flyers in the sort of premier Monarch deck in the format?
I mean, Tron just didn't have problems with that deck anyway, so I don't know.
Because I'm just imagining if you did use this as like tech against the Monarch deck, like I've got to imagine that since this doesn't have flying, unless you have flyers or removal to back it up, like you're not gonna stay the Monarch very long.
Well, I don't think you would play this first. I think you would wait for them to be the Monarch, and then you would play this, because whoever plays the last Monarch card ends up the Monarch. And so if Tron didn't need the creature, it could just take it at a later time when the board was clear.
Okay, that's I think that's fair. I guess. Yeah, I think this one is really hampered by the fact that it's 5 mana, which is a big ask for a lot of decks. And I don't know, with Elves, could they potentially cut like Lissalana Huntmaster for this? I don't know.
No, Lissalana Huntmaster is way too good. Yeah, what would they cut for a 5 mana do nothing essentially on its first turn?
Just run it instead of Lead the Stampede. It'll be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be okay.
All right. Moving on to my number 2. I picked out Innocent Blood, and this is a sorcery for a single black mana. Each player sacrifices a creature. And I think this card is much better than it looks on its face. If you're playing some sort of slower control deck, I've got to imagine most of the time this is one-sided, even if you are not running a creatureless plan.
People used to play this card. This is maybe the only card on this list that people used to play in a tier. Well, I mean, I guess maybe complete disregard. But didn't Blue Black Delver or maybe some form of Teachings play Innocent Blood for a while?
I've definitely seen it played in Teachings. It just kind of lets you get your opponent, because that deck never really plans on having that many creatures around. So I've definitely seen it there, but I just think in general, like, there are a decent amount of pretty efficient threats at 1 and 2 mana now, and just being able to kind of have a 1 mana snap off on turn 2 if you have a tap land for your second land. I just really like that aspect of it. So I think if you're in some sort of like slower black, probably a control deck, I think that Innocent Blood fits into that plan well, just because it is. I think this is the most efficient edict effect, I have to imagine. Can you think of anything better?
For just B, no. Diabolic or the other one, yeah, Diabolic is an instant, so you can actually tutor for it. Maybe that makes it a little bit better in Teachings, but yeah, I don't think that there is a more efficient edict, especially if you don't have a creature on the board.
Yeah, and I think the reason that it just doesn't see play more often is the fact that I think people are want to, assume that playing it means you have to be completely creatureless, which obviously, makes any downside it had go away. But I think with plenty of decks in the format that are kind of going the more controlling route, they're not landing creatures that quickly in the early game anyway. So I think that having this card in your deck, I don't think is the end of the world. I think well, a lot of times you'll be able to snap it off before the downside becomes a downside.
In your opinion, Mike, if you had to say, well, I have to run creatures because eventually I have to win the game, but what's a creature I don't really care about sacrificing? Can you guess what that creature would be, Mike, in this situation?
Seagate Oracle?
No, it'd be Abyssal Gatekeeper, because when it dies, then they would have to sacrifice another creature.
Ooh, bringing out the super spicy secret tech here.
Abyssal Gatekeeper is 1 and a black for a 1/1. When it dies, each player sacrifices a creature. And the artwork on that card is amazing.
It's like a weird spider thing, right?
Yeah, but it's got Gerard asking it a question.
Oh, yeah.
And he threatens him.
Because it's a gatekeeper. Got it. Well done, Wizards art department. You got us on that one.
It's a Mark Tedin picture, dude. It's great.
Oh, is that actually a Mark Tedin? I never noticed that. But in all seriousness, newer players, this is somewhat of a joke. This is a convoluted setup for a double edict.
Sorry. Yeah, let's keep going with the show.
All right. So what is your number one? Your card that you think more people should play and is generally underrated?
I really hope Aaron is listening, because this is an actual conversation we've had. I think the most underrated card in the format, the one that you all should be playing but you're somehow not, is Boomerang. Boomerang is a UU instant. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. And in its original printing, it features a quote from King Richard II. So it's pretty cool.
Like King Richard II, the person?
The play by Shakespeare. Sorry.
Okay, that was my question. I didn't know if this was one that was old enough to have. Oh yeah, it's from William Shakespeare. All right. So what do you see as like the really big upside to why someone should want to play Boomerang?
I'm going to look you straight in the eyes, Mike, and I'm going to tell you tempo plays.
I should have seen it coming. In all seriousness, though, this is actually a tempo card.
Yeah. So the reason it doesn't get played is because better versions of that card, unfortunately, exist. Echoing Truth. Doesn't hit lands like this card does, but bounces all permanents with the same name. So bouncing the land, I feel like, I guess if you like went turn 1 Delver on the play and they went turn 1 tapped land and you go Boomerang, like that's pretty sick, right? But by and large, the fact that it can target lands isn't super relevant, I don't think. And then like the 1 mana on Vapor Snag plus the life loss often is. And people don't even run Unsummon.
Yeah. I mean, Unsummon's just been completely outclassed by Vapor Snag. It's almost always the better card. And also, I think bears mentioning, there is cap size for slower decks or big mana decks that, is this effect but repeatable. So I've got to imagine those get crowded out there. Also, I did not know. I pulled it up. I didn't know that there was a version with Richard Kane Ferguson art on it. That's actually...
Which one's...
It's the Mirage one. It's actually really awesome.
Yeah, I have a couple of those. They're sweet.
But, okay, so you where do you imagine that Boomerang could potentially have a home? I think I have a feeling I know, but...
I think because it is UU, you have to play it in Mono Blue Delver.
Only Mono Blue? You think this is too taxing for the Blue-Red version?
So a little 50-50. I think they just have less mana to spare, by and large. So I think it is. I think it is relevant that it costs you and not UR, because I think there are a lot of turns where you would have like 3 blue and like maybe 1 red, and you wouldn't be able to hold up your counterspell and your Boomerang.
Okay. So basically, the fact that they need to be able to have access to that second color a lot of the time, you think is just going to make this a little bit too difficult alongside running a play set of counterspells?
Yeah, I think it's just gonna be a little hard, and then it also lends itself to days a little better because you're maybe running more islands. So I just think it'd be better and easier to cast in the mono blue deck.
Okay, I can definitely see that. And yeah, I don't know. It's one of those cards that I never really think of when I think of like powerful commons, but it definitely has its place.
The biggest upside, like I said, is that it hits lands, and so in the super tempo play I mentioned earlier, you would just you'd effectively time walk your opponent, maybe flip Delver and start getting in.
I was gonna say I'm just gonna throw this out there for your enjoyment. Can you imagine how good this feels if your opponent is on the play? They go turn 1 land, turn 2 nothing, play a bounce land, and you get to get them with this.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. So
yeah,
it is strong. Maybe it is a bit more of a gotcha card, and so it's a little gimmicky, but I do like the effect quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think we definitely at some point need to have the discussion about gotcha cards, because it's a whole topic.
This is a different kind of gotcha card than the one that's currently in the news, Mike.
Yeah. All right. So rounding things out, I've got my number 1, and it's a funky one. I think people have not properly analyzed Mind Stone. Mind Stone was originally printed in like Stronghold or something. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact. It taps to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, and you can pay 2 tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. And I think that this is one of those things that it is not as graceful as like Mana Dorks or, playing perhaps a Signet, but I do really like the versatility of it. I like the fact that it ramps you on turn 2, and I like the fact that it draws a card. What are your feelings on this card, Adrian?
Mind Stone is pretty sweet. I'll have you know it is from Weatherlight, which is also the first printing of Abyssal Gatekeeper. So, just saying. It's also interesting. Its artwork has never changed. Like, even though, despite how many times it's been printed, its artwork has never.
There is a promo. There is a promo with alt art. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No, I have. I know what you're talking about.
It's literally a brain. It's just a brain.
It's a brain that's a rock, dude. It's a Mind Stone.
Yeah.
I think the reason people don't play it is that because they play Pristine Talisman instead. Because I think gaining the life for that deck might be a little bit more important to its game plan than drawing the card, and which is a weird thing to say for a control deck, but it works so well in conjunction with Evankar's Justice. I am, of course, talking about teachings. That the life gain is relevant, and of course, that's not really a deck people play anymore. Maybe you could play this in a deck like Tron, but then my argument would be: isn't the best 2 mana artifact in the format just Prophetic Prism?
I mean, so yeah, that Prophetic Prism does give you the filtering, and it does, draw you a card immediately. I feel like I feel this is kind of an apples oranges situation where the decks that want to play something like Mind Stone are different than something like Tron or, one of the Boros decks that wants to play Prophetic Prism, either for the fact that they need to fix mana or that it's part of a draw engine. So I think these are subtly different cards. And we can even talk about the third option. There is also Prismatic Lens, which is a 2 mana rock that adds colorless, but can also do the filtering part. So I guess out of those 3, obviously Prophetic Prism sees the most play. I guess from your point of view, do you think that Mind Stone is better or worse than Prismatic Lens?
I have to look that one up again real fast. Prismatic Lens, I think I know what it does.
So it's 2 mana rock for colorless, or it can filter. It also does the filtering thing.
I think the filtering is what makes Prismatic Lens more played. Tron plays that card too, and maybe I'm just thinking because the big mana decks in this format do actually really care about their colors, whereas in other formats that play Mind Stone, the decks typically don't, or it's just like a good cube card. So maybe that's really what's holding it back, is that the card draw is not as important as the filtering of the decks that want it. I think I do like Prismatic Lens better still.
Okay, that I think that's fair. I just have a soft spot for Mind Stone as, 2 2-mana mana rocks are generally pretty good. Just having a way to ramp that early.
Yeah, I agree. And in the decks where Mindstone is good, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. So we've been talking about this. If you have any underrated cards that you'd like to bring to our attention, this might be something we return to. Kind of a Revenge of the Maybeboard, if you will. If you remember that segment from way back.
Back in the Stone Age, back around the 60s, I think. We stopped doing it way before that.
All right. So I think for the second half of the show, what I want to do here is we brought it up a couple times, and you kind of, as you alluded to, Adrian, perhaps not a tier 1 archetype anymore. But we just got a dump of new deck lists, and there's a teachings list here. And I don't think we, are going to do the super deep deck tech style dive on this one. But I guess I just want to have a discussion about this. So I'm giving you a link to look at. There was an Esper teachings list that went 5-0 recently. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion on this deck and what it's kind of trying to do here. So notably, the white inclusions here are a single copy of Overrule, which is X white blue for an instant counter spell. Unless its controller pays X, you gain X life. And a Journey to Nowhere, or 4 copies of Journey to Nowhere, an Oblivion Ring. And this deck is actually running 2 copies of Rhystic Study. So it's definitely a weird one. What are your thoughts on this deck?
Rhystic Study would have been another great one for the underrated list, is what I'm immediately thinking. Wow, what a deck! is the other thing that I'm thinking. It just has 1 copy of Evankar's Justice as its win condition. I mean, the deck is spicy.
It does have 4 copies of Curse of the Bloody Tome as well, so it can win by milling.
Yeah, I did miss that. I think I'm gonna try and play this. It is super duper spicy. Should we just cover the deck real fast?
Yeah. I'm just gonna do kind of a eagle eye view of it. Because a lot of these are cards we talk about fairly frequently on the show. For spells, we've got 2 Disfigure, an Innocent Blood, which we discussed in this list. 3 copies of Preordain, 2 Chainer's Edicts, 4 counter spells, an Echoing Decay, 2 copies of Geth's Verdict, a copy of Overrule, as we discussed, 4 copies of Think Twice, 3 copies of Crypt Incursion. Wow, that seems high. 1 copy of Wail of the Nim, 1 copy of Evenkar's Justice, 2 copies of Mystical Teachings, 4 Journey to Nowhere, 4 Curse of the Bloody Tome, an Oblivion Ring, 2 Rhystic Studies. And then, what do you think about this land base? I don't know if you managed to look at the second column of this deck list, but this looks a little weird for a Teachings deck.
There's no bounce lands.
Yeah, there aren't. There's also 4 Evolving Wilds in here and only 22 lands. And usually these were traditionally decks that ran a pretty high land count with Karus. So I guess my main thought when I look at this is the old Teachings decks, kind of one of their hallmarks was just sitting there and waiting until they had enough mana to loop through whatever their inevitability win condition was. And with this deck, there's not that many lands in it in the great scheme of things.
I want to talk about. Oh, sorry, we're still talking about the lands. I'd move on to the sideboard.
Oh, go ahead. Take the sideboard. Take this and tell people.
Because really the reason to be in white, it seems to me, is not really Journey to Nowhere, Oblivion Ring, which are still sweet cards, but it's because you can play Cop Blue. And if Izzet Delver is the best deck in the format, you have a ton of removal, so you beat out all the other creature decks, and then you have Cop Blue in your sideboard. Like, I don't know if Izzet Delver can beat you.
I mean, that does predicate drawing a early Circle of Protection blue and resolving it, but sure. I don't think that's, impossible.
You could if you had Boomerang.
Ooh, there you go. Boomerang their land.
But you're right. They do seem this deck builder does seem very preoccupied with aggro. I think 3 copies Crypt Incursion feels like they're gunning for aggressive decks. 3 copies Cop Red and the sideboard feels like they're gunning for aggressive decks. Also 4 copies Lone Missionary. Like this person does not want to run out of life.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things I also wanted to touch on. There's no copies of Pristine Talisman in this at all.
And that it would be perfect with how obsessed this list is with gaining life.
Well, I think that's the reason why we're seeing, Overrule. We're seeing 3 copies of Crypt Incursion. The board has 4 different life gain creatures. It has 4 life gain creatures in it. I think the big thing here is this person has said that Pristine Talisman doesn't quite fit their idea of their game plan, and they're just going to gain huge chunks of life instead of, gaining 1 life per turn slowly. I don't know. This just looking at this selling feels a little off to me. And obviously, it got there, so it works somewhat. But this sideboard is like, I'm looking at it. The sideboard is all white cards except for 3 of them, and it's 2 copies of Doomblade and a copy of Wail of the Nim. So this is definitely, very insistent upon the white, and I think, I don't know, I'm almost looking at this and thinking like, no, I guess this costs white to activate. I was gonna bring up the Runes of Protection, but those probably aren't gonna fit in this game plan. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of shocked that there's not also like Circle of Protection green in here at this point.
I don't know, man. This deck is nuts.
Yeah, I guess looking at this, is there anything you'd change about this list if you were going to run it?
Sorry, I'm just thinking. Maybe you could play. The deck doesn't seem like it wants to play any creatures. Like I feel like that's a very conscious choice. I was going to suggest Muldrifter. Muldrifter is a win condition that does what these decks want to do, which is draw cards, right? Mm-hmm. So,
how would you feel about Custody Squire? As a way to...
The deck doesn't really mill itself.
It doesn't really mill itself, but
it could.
It gives you a way to have a threat in the air and also recur... Like, a decent chunk of your removal suite is enchantments. So, I guess it might be more of a sideboard card, but... I guess that might not be absolutely the best. Also, for a deck that is likely leaving up a decent amount of mana on its opponent's turn, it kind of feels weird to me that this deck isn't choosing to run Ash Barrens over Evolving Wilds. Do you think that's a tactical decision or a budgetary one?
Oh, yeah, I didn't even thought of that. I imagine it must be budgetary, right? There's not even any brainstorms. You can't even make that argument.
I'm just looking at this, like the budget for this. This is an $18 deck online. This is I have to imagine
it's a budgetary consideration.
Yeah, there's just it feels to me like there's a very good idea here, and I wouldn't mind like taking this list and maybe tweaking it a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff that I would expect to see here that I'm just not seeing. Like 0 copies of either Dispel or Hydroblast in the board. I guess they're running Circle of Protection red, which does help out against the red decks a lot. I don't know. This is a real funky one here. Also, what do you think about this sideboard tech in the form of Allay?
I was actually just thinking about it. Why are they so worried about enchantments? I don't know. Maybe they don't think their Boggles matchup is very good somehow.
I mean, I'm looking. There's like 5 Edict effects.
It's good against Curse of the Pierced Heart. But you have so much life gain. I'm sure your burn matchup's pretty good. Doesn't get rid of Rancor. Does get rid of some of the enchantments on the heroic decks, or all the enchantments on them. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, that's just a real funky one, especially because I'm noticing even though this deck's a white deck, it has no way to deal with, outside of Oblivion Ring, it has no way to deal with artifacts. So I'm almost wondering, like, the 6 Circles of Protection seem a little excessive. And I'm also wondering if this isn't a deck that wants to run some number of Muddle the Mixture. because I'm looking here and I'm seeing a lot of 2s, and you could conceivably justify running Muddle because it would let you tutor for the Circles of Protection post board, and I've got to imagine that those shore up some matchups pretty heavily. So I don't know. I like the core concept of this. I wish we had slightly better win cons here, but this almost honestly to me feels like the type of deck that I'd want to run Guardian Idol in, just to have that as a win con.
That'd be sweet. Yeah.
Like, can you imagine this deck? Because Guardian Idol's only a creature when you need it to be, so it's never dying to your Even Cards Justice. It's never getting hit by that one copy of Innocent Blood.
You can use it to pay for Overrule later in the game.
Yeah, you can even use it to make sure that you can hit that Even Cards Justice a turn earlier than you would otherwise. I don't know. There's something here, but I'm not 100% on it. And I definitely really like Overrule. God, I really just want to play this in Tron. This feels like something that would be absolutely sweet in Tron.
Doesn't Logan have a blue-white Tron deck? You should ask him for his list.
I think we actually covered that list on the show, and that's how long we've been doing this darn podcast that we've started to forget about early episodes.
Yikes.
And I do want to talk, do you think Rhystic Study is actually good here?
I think if there's a deck that's going to play, it's going to be this wacky brew. So, yes.
I mean, I guess that's fair. It looks like a lot of do nothing, but I guess I don't rightfully know how I'd play against this deck. It feels like a resolved Rhystic Study against some decks is just going to be a miserable time, but against other decks it might not matter as much. I don't know. This is a neat deck. We'll have a link for it for the fans in the comments under the video, but definitely if you've played this deck or are thinking about checking it out, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get some feedback on what you think the deck does right, what you think it perhaps could be tuned a little bit more with. But definitely let us know your thoughts on this, because this was the one that caught my eye the most out of the most recent batch of dumps.
Mike is a dyed-in-the-wool control player, so that does not surprise me.
Yeah. It also, just the fact that we saw a Teachings deck is kind of weird.
What stood out to me was the zombie deck. That deck was cool. You should check out the decks every week. The new system, maybe not so bad.
Do you want to actually kind of touch a little bit on what you liked about that zombie deck? Because I looked at it and it didn't really strike me as much different than most of the zombie decks I've seen.
Will you link me to the challenge?
Actually, I found the exact deck that you want to talk about, so I'm just gonna slam that bad boy over to you. I'm assuming this is the one because I don't think there were 2 zombie decks this week. Like, I'm seeing some neat little interactions here, but
the problem is that it has to play bad cards. The payoff is that you get to play Gym Palm Polluter, which is a BB cycle. When you cycle it, you have a target player lose 1 life for each zombie in play. So that's strong and uncounterable. If you have a ton of zombies out, you're probably going to win the game.
Oh, geez. I thought it was both players for that effect. Oh, wow. That's actually much, much better than I thought it was. I don't know. You get to play a bunch of sweet cards in this deck, if nothing else. Like, you get to play Grey Merchant with a bunch of black pips. You get to play...
There's a combo with Nameless Inversion and Ghoul Caller's Chant.
Oh, and Ghoul Razor as well. Which is the 3-mana 2/2. When it dies, return a zombie card from your graveyard to your hand.
This deck is cool. This deck is $3.
Oh my god, it sure is. We will definitely be linking this in the comments. If you want to get on Magic Online, it will actually cost you more to create your account than to buy this deck. And for folks working in the paper world, this deck is $13 American dollars. So definitely to check out if you're on a pretty tight budget.
This could be your entrance into the format. This deck is cool.
My only thought with this deck is Carnophage? I don't know. Carnophage seems a little funky to me.
Sure.
All right. Well, we've talked a little bit about a lot of things, and we're pulling up on our hour of podcast entertainment. Adrian, is there anything else you'd like to leave with our discussions about this zombies deck, this Teachings deck? underrated cards in Pauper. Any words of wisdom for the folks before we start the outro?
No, I think I'm ready. Thank you all for joining us today. This podcast is brought with support of our patrons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. You can check below this video description on the podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you for listening to this on a platform with reviews. They're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. As always, special thanks to Pat's Games, My LGS, JP Comics, Mike's LGS, and the ever-talented and musical L. He does our theme song Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks over at his site, soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.